Let's talk story, as the Hawaiians say. Let's talk about how you talk about sustainability. In many ways, we're doing it wrong. And so we'll talk about some of the things we're doing that are not as effective as they might be, and how to talk about your sustainability story, how to connect with the values of your listeners, and then go over some rules for more effective communication. This political strategist said that most conservation organizations think you convince people by giving them science and facts. You change people's minds, he said, by figuring out what's important to them, which is rarely the science. You present the arguments on their terms. Logic doesn't matter in this sense. It matters to me, it matters to you. Facts don't matter when you're trying to convince someone. Most people make decisions, frame their opinions based on filtered facts, based on their belief systems. So if you take the totality of facts and run it through the screen of their belief system, what you get out the bottom are filtered facts. It's not what you say, it's what people hear. So are you communicating effectively about sustainability or about anything? Most consumers admit they don't know where to get good sustainability information, and they don't understand the impact of their behavior when they buy something, how they live their lives. And no surprise, if you listen to the verbiage that comes out of a lot of people who talk about sustainability or the environment, there's a lot of babble going on. There are a lot of labels. If you're a company, which one of these do you use? It's hard to know the right way to go. Consider your audience and think about words and phrases and points of view that turn people off or turn people on. These are some of the trigger words for a lot of people in business, a lot of people who come at these issues from a more conservative point of view. People say, why are traditional businesses so resistant to sustainability? I think it's because we have not properly positioned the topic, and we've sure not effectively communicated to most of the business community, or indeed to mainstream America. We need to shift from trying to change attitudes to making doing the right thing just normal. We need to mainstream green, in the words of Freya Williams. America has a set of core values. Our country was based on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, on concepts like prosperity and community, but at the same time, the rights of the individual. How do we position sustainability for mainstream business people? If we fail to do this, many business people will continue to reject these concepts, even though there's a very strong business case. Unless we can get in touch with and speak to their personal belief systems and help them understand that what we're talking about is greater prosperity, greater security, better meaning. Things like cleaner, safer, healthier. Everybody wants these. These are the beginnings of a value proposition. So I find when talking to business people, to more conservative people, it's better to position sustainability as an opportunity to talk about the business case, to talk about how it solves our economic problems and creates jobs, and to connect to these American strengths, and values. So these are positive trigger words: the business case, top line revenue, bottom line profit, brand enhancement, productivity, mitigating risk. If instead we talk about what's your carbon footprint or metric tons of CO2, who speaks in metrics in the United States? Carbon audits, nobody likes an audit. Sometimes just saying global warming as opposed to talking about climate change can trigger people. Environmentalists tend to start the argument with, we're all going to die, it's the end of the world. That turns a lot of people off. Try talking about cutting our reliance on foreign oil or efficiency. Why? Too many people still think that global warming is not caused by humans. It's a natural phenomenon. So why should we change our lifestyle to do anything about it? You can get into that argument if you want to, and the science will be on your side. Human activity is causing climate change. But why go there? CO2 costs money. When we buy all of these fossil fuels, we're spending money that we don't have to. Businesses buy the fossil fuels, they burn them, they emit CO2 for all of these activities. What if you can do these activities better, cheaper, without using fossil fuels? What if behaving responsibly to people and the planet saves you money, drives increase in stock value? This also touches the fact that most people want to behave responsibly. Given a choice, people will prefer an environmentally positive product. And there is a very strong business case for sustainability. As we've said, it cuts your costs, drives your profits. If you eliminate waste, this is eliminating unsaleable production. You paid to make it, but you're not deriving value from it. So you increase your revenues. You increase your competitive advantage by boosting brand integrity, opening new markets, getting new customers, increasing the appeal for your products. It cuts risk. It enhances stock value. All of this adds up to money for business people. Businesses that implement more sustainable practices strengthen their business operations at the same time that they're protecting the environment. Security. Renewable energy, energy storage enhances economic development, global competitiveness, national defense, gives us freedom and independence. This is not a left or a right issue, a red or a blue issue. My friend Jim Woolsey, who used to run the CIA, drove a plug-in hybrid car that he fueled off the solar panels on his roof because he said, he had a bumper sticker on the back, said, Osama bin Laden hates my car. Jim is most assuredly not a liberal, but to him, this is an issue of national security. We can promote the business case and stay in touch with these traditional American values. Things like small businesses, efficiency, grown at home, avoiding rising prices of commodities. The United States has for years borrowed money from places like China to buy imported oil in competition with China. This is just daft. Who said this? I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. Thomas Edison. When you can use examples like this, he's an icon to entrepreneurs, you can begin to talk to people who may have very different value sets than you do. Made in the US. Be positive. We can solve these problems. We have the technologies. Let's do it. Talk up what we have done in the past. Refer to our American can-do attitude. And understand that there are unexpected allies. The military has been very keen on renewable energy because it enhances their warfighting capabilities. Outfits like Formula E, electric car racing, or NASCAR, or beer. New Belgium Brewery has a campaign to save rivers, but most blue-collar workers love their beer. New Belgium's a pretty good beer. The Blue Angels are burning half biofuel. The Navy, Ray Mabus, when he was Secretary of Navy, said, our ships used to run on coal. We had coaling stations around the world, and then oil. We can run on biofuels. NASCAR is cutting its environmental impact while bringing the values of renewable energy to that group of people who like to see cars go round in a circle for a long time. They're recycling, they're partnering, they're getting their buildings LEED certified, running on ethanol. They found that this actually increases the horsepower of the vehicles. The then CEO said, it's my hope that we'll be a more attractive place for the green economy as it unfolds. It's terribly important to the car manufacturers. It's also important to our sponsorship base. Tracks, some of the IndyCar tracks are using 100% ethanol, putting in solar. Pocono Raceway in Pennsylvania has a 25-acre solar farm. The Sonoma Raceway is using solar. They're a test track for they are a test track for autonomous electric vehicles. Solar, saving water, and rather than spending fossil energy to mow the brush around the track, they have a herd of sheep. They have owls to deal with the pests, to reduce the use of pesticides. And I can tell you, I've been there and done hot laps with Mario Andretti. They go fast. Communicating sustainability. Here are some of the rules. Don't be dull. What words do you use to talk about sustainability, and do they excite your audience? Think about the best movie you recently saw. These are some of the words that would come to mind. And then think about the words that we typically use to talk about sustainability. Yeah, not quite so exciting. How do you define sustainability? This is the UN's definition, but will that resonate with the people to whom you're speaking? Help them think about what it is that they want, and then how to frame behaving more responsibly to people and to planet in these terms. Elon Musk showed that sustainability can be sexy, can be exciting. Method, taking plastic extracted from the ocean and making bottles that are recycled, recyclable, and a lot more attractive to have in your kitchen. You may have seen stickers like this. Yeah, snore. How about this one? It's going to get your attention. Levi's did a look at the life cycle impacts of a pair of jeans. And what they realized, the real impact was after they sold the jeans. It's how many times do you wash it? Do you use hot water? And what are the chemicals that you use in washing the jeans? And so their staff decided to have an Instagram campaign of showing themselves wearing their jeans more than one day. Chipotle. They realized that what they really are selling is not just a burrito, but a food culture. They said, we had an epiphany that if you're going to serve the best food, fresh isn't enough. It's just a starting point, that it has to be better in every respect. Their carnitas weren't selling, so they said, we're not selling many. It won't hurt us to go to a more expensive but better supply, Nyman Ranch pork. They went from the cheapest piece of their food to the most expensive, and sales doubled. They said people are willing to pay more for better food. They're getting their facilities LEED certified and working with their staff to empower them, to teach them. Rule 2, don't preach. Your listener wants to be applauded, not scolded. If you think about what creates our perceptions of reality, there are many factors in it: where we came from, political point of view, are we old, are we young? Learn to honor your audience and talk to them where they're at, not necessarily where you're at. This is frequently the position that people take. I'm right, you're wrong. Really? It might be better to come at this conversation from the point of view of, what do you value? What's important to you? And then what about sustainability might motivate you? You know you have gotten to people as a brand, as a company, when they start to tattoo your logo on their body. There is much about sustainability, environmental protection that appeals to conservatives, many of whom are hunters, fisher folk. They care about local values, they care about beauty, the outdoors, farming communities, rural life. They see themselves as stewards of the earth. Talk to these values. There is a long-standing American tradition of conservation. Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. Teddy talked about, I do not recognize the right to waste our natural resources or to rob by wasteful use the generation that comes after us. And so he created the national parks. Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. These are some of the values of conservative Americans. Talk to them and realize that some of our most important environmental laws were put in place by conservatives. Richard Nixon put in place the National Environmental Policy Act, Endangered Species, National Marine Mammal Protection Act. All of these others came from a Republican. In his letter to Congress, creating the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, he called for the better protection of life and property from natural hazards and a better understanding of the total environment. Reagan and Thatcher put together the Montreal Protocol, stopping the emission of ozone-destroying chlorofluorocarbons. And this was an incredibly effective international agreement that has driven down the use of these dangerous chemicals. Similarly, the acid rain problem was solved by market-based solutions, creating a cap and trade, a cap on the emissions and a trading regime so that companies that hadn't yet figured out how to do it could buy credits from the companies that were smarter and were cutting their costs by dropping their emissions of sulfur. We can use this same approach to help solve the climate crisis. And indeed, this is exactly what the Republican governor of California did, putting in place a cap and then handing it to the Democratic head of the California Air Resources Board and said, Mary, figure it out. And Mary Nichols put in place a market-based trading regime to limit carbon emissions. Doing this drove California's economy. This is just better business. Rule 3, be honest, be transparent. If you're a company, you better be sure you're telling the truth. Customers are starting to verify the claims that you make. They go online, they read the boxes. This doesn't cut it anymore. Being honest, talking about what you're doing well, what you could be doing better. This breeds trust, which breeds loyalty. And invite your customers to help you in this journey. This is something that Patagonia is very good at. Their Footprint Chronicles shows where products come from, what's in them, where around the world do they come from, and how do you reduce the impact. So they show the footprint of their products. Eric Schmidt, when he was CEO of Google, said, if you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. There are now online platforms like Glassdoor that allow employees of a company to talk about what's going on inside the company. Check yours out. You might be surprised. There's a real temptation to tell your sustainability story in ways that just shade the truth a little bit. Years ago, I worked with the company Kashi, which insisted that their customers knew that when they said natural, that didn't mean organic. Not entirely. Customers, when they realized that what Kashi was saying in its ads weren't quite true, attacked them. And rather than saying, yes, you're right, we should have been more specific, Kashi defended itself. We've done nothing wrong because the FDA doesn't regulate what the term natural means. Not good. This is greenwashing. This is just not true. What your brand is matters. What it stands for matters. And you need a culture within your community, within your company, that supports that. British Petroleum is a good example of both what to do right and what to do wrong. Lord John Brown, when he was CEO, said, I don't know if climate change is real or not, but if it is, it's something that we as a company have to deal with. And so we're going to turn it from a threat into an opportunity. He rebranded British Petroleum as Beyond Petroleum. And bought the company an enormous amount of goodwill. About 10 years of goodwill, despite the fact that they spent a great deal more money marketing this than they did on actually transforming the company, and that they spilled oil all over the North Slope of Alaska, killed people at a refinery fire in Texas. But they were serious about energy efficiency, about reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, and saving money. They saved $650 million by cutting their emissions and implementing efficiency measures. However, they cut corners. They saved $550,000 at Deepwater Horizon and then spilled oil all over the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, activists took to social media and showed that the company had really only spent a little of its money on shifting to beyond petroleum. The spill cost BP $650 billion. Shareholders took a real bath. And they realized you don't own your own brand. The world out there owns your brand. Activists created a fake Twitter account that had 190,000 followers. The official BP site only had 20. Shell Oil, same sort of situation. In the 80s, Shell was complicit in the hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Shell was spilling oil all over the Niger Delta. Sir Mark Moody Stewart became the CEO of Shell in the mid-90s. And he said, we need to be honest. We need to tell people what we're doing and what we've done wrong. We need to engage with our critics. He used a practice called scenario planning to rethink what Shell's future might be, and found it plausible that Shell would transition from being an oil company to being a renewables company. So he started investing in wind, in solar, in energy efficiency, in hydrogen. They found it entirely plausible that by 2050, Europe could be half renewable. The company would continue to grow, but their percentage of non-renewable would go down. They would shift from being an oil company to being an energy company. They would help lead the dematerialization of society. They would still make money. They'd just be a somewhat different company. Under this regime, Shell became the world's largest company. It was the target of investment by a lot of socially responsible investors until Sir Mark resigned. It matters who your leadership is. And when Phil Watts came in as the managing director, he said, this is all silly. We're an oil company and we're going to go back to drilling oil. He had a little problem though. Shell had far fewer proven reserves than the other oil majors. To Sir Mark, this wasn't a problem. If you're migrating away from oil, what's the worry? If you're going to be an oil company, it's a problem. And so Watts and the others under his command cooked the books. And Shell shareholders took a 40% share bath. They had to restate the books and then restate them again. Monsanto. This is a company that has just had a tough slog of it. Monsanto's great product is Roundup, glyphosate. You have glyphosate in your body. There's glyphosate in the hairs of polar bears. It's everywhere. Monsanto did this because the other part of their company was making genetically modified organisms, which they could insert into the gene structure of plants so that they could spray Roundup and it wouldn't kill the crop. A lot of people didn't like that, protested. Their CEO at the time was a man named Bob Shapiro. Bob actually sat at my kitchen table and said, I want Monsanto to be a sustainable company. And we said, okay, we can help. And put together a group of people who could advise Monsanto on how to make a corporate transition. Bob said, no, my scientists are the smartest people in the world. We don't need you. In due course, he lost his job. Monsanto was sold for the value of its pharmaceuticals division, but it never learned this lesson. The name Monsanto was reconstituted, making glyphosate and GMOs. It was then bought by Bayer, the big German chemical group, in 2016. In 2018, the Monsanto division started losing lawsuits. Thousands of these have been filed by people who got cancer, likely as a result of using glyphosate, Roundup. Stock value in Bayer fell 45%. Investors are now suing the company because of its ill-advised purchase of Monsanto. This is where you don't want to be, labeled as the least eco-friendly companies. And you don't want to be shading the truth. The Federal Trade Commission has started to look at claims put forth for whether or not yours is really a green product. To prevent deception, they said claims should be clear, prominent, and understandable. They should be detailed as to whether it's the product, the packaging, a service, or just a portion, and they should not overstate the claims that you're making. They should avoid consumer confusion. This is a warning to companies. Get it right. Be honest, be transparent. They're starting to require proof of the claims that you're making. Rule 4, tell your story, let it go. Don't be tight-mouthed about it. Be honest, but tell it. I worked with L'Oreal. They actually were a pretty good company. They had a lot of good environmental things they were doing, good things for their workers, but they were afraid to tell the story because they said, if we say something, the critics will attack us because we're not perfect. Now they have started to tell their story. They have a very strong sustainability division. Similarly, Adidas. Until the Green Olympics in London, Adidas said, we didn't talk about sustainability. Customers would have had a hard time finding that we were doing anything about it because we thought it was just the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but it's also an important part of your brand message. Humans have always learned from stories. This is the timeless way that we have learned. So what's your story? This is the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's great analysis that he said all great stories throughout all time have been a call to adventure, typically on someone who didn't really want to go on an adventure. They come across an aid, a guardian, and they cross a threshold, which is the beginning of the transformation. They meet a mentor, a helper. They go into the abyss and are transformed and atone for what they have done before and then return with a gift for their home, their family, society. Think about the stories that captivate you. These all have these timeless elements. Tell your story, but do it as a conversation. Be honest, be transparent, talk about what you're doing well, where you still need help, and invite your customers to help you. Jeff Jarvis wrote this book, What Would Google Do? Not so much about Google, but about the fact that Google gets it right in having a conversation. He said, you don't own your brand. Your customers own your brand. He tells the story of having bought a Dell computer, and Dell had a promise that if you get a bad one, we'll fix it. He got a bad one, wrote to the company blew him off. Not a good idea to blow off a Business Week reporter. And so he started to blog about it and tell his whole story of the trouble he was having with this computer. It wound up Michael Dell actually had to call him and apologize, grumpily, he said. And it almost cost Dell its corporate survival. Jarvis then profiles the extent to which the companies that get it right engage in this conversation and say, your customers, even if you get something wrong, your customers, by giving you feedback, help you to make a better product. Your employees are your best communicators, he said. Trust them, empower them, the good and the bad. One of the best companies at doing this is Adnams Brewery, which year on year on year has won Best Brewery of the Year in the United Kingdom. They're doing a lot about sustainability, but what they do in this context that's particularly good is encourage all of their employees to blog, to tweet, to talk about what life is like at Adnams. Lots of companies are starting to engage their employees around how can we improve our sustainability story. Jeff Hollander, CEO of Seventh Generation, said, just issuing press releases, those days are gone. The message of the company will come from your customers, from your supply chains, from NGOs, from the world out there. You need to embrace Web 2.0 and get good at it, or it'll kill you. This is a video that was made. There have been several iterations made since then of the power of social media. Get good at social media. Learn what it is and how you can use it. This is one of the updates of that video. A lot of people, particularly older people, say, I don't need to be on social media. That's for kids. No, that's for business. So, social media 101. Be real. Tell the truth. Add value. Set it free. Don't ignore it. Focus on your evangelists and on your critics. Don't put idiots in charge and don't fake it. Influence your audience and move them to action. Maimonides said, each of us must see ourselves as though the entire world were held in balance, and any deed we do could tip the scales. This is the key to communicating sustainability. What are you doing? What do you care about? What does your listener care about? Speak to caring. Speak to these values. That's what's real.